Okay, in today's lesson, we're going to learn how to convert units using conversion factors. So to start, we're going to review a little bit from math class. If you recall from math class, if you have a number that is both in the numerator and the denominator, and you're dividing them, they will cancel out, or they will become equal to 1. So 10 divided by 10 is equal to 1. So now, if I were to multiply anything by this unit of 1, I would get that same thing back. And you can kind of see that down below in this example down here. Here I've got 1.6 over 1.6, and those two are, one is in the numerator and one's in the denominator, so they will cancel to become a factor of 1, and then when I multiply 5 by that factor of 1, I get that same 5 back out. This is important when we're going to be converting units later, because we're going to need to multiply by a unit of 1. Similarly, if you have a number in the numerator and another number in the denominator that are being multiplied by each other, two fractions here, they will still cancel. So 15 and 76 hundredths in the numerator and 15 and 76 hundredths in the denominator will end up canceling out as well. They become a factor of 1. And the same with the 3.5 and the 3.5. So here I end up with 1 and 1, and then 1 times 1 is equal to simply 1 again. Down below we have another example. So here we've got 2 and 67 hundredths divided by 2 and 67 hundredths. That's a factor of 1. And when I multiply anything by a factor of 1, I get that same thing back. So this will be equal to 7. Okay, so let's look at a little bit about how this is going to help us when we are converting units. Well, the first thing is, when we have our units in the problem, it works very similar to when I had 10 in the numerator and 10 in the denominator. If I see centimeters in the numerator and centimeters in the denominator, they will cancel out, even if they are not directly above each other. So here I've got centimeters in the numerator and the denominator. Again, they'll cancel out to become a factor of 1. And feet will cancel out to become a factor of 1. And then 1 times 1 is equal to 1. So here I'm left with no units. Down the bottom left-hand corner, got another example. Here I've got feet, and this feet over here on the left is in the numerator. It's like as if it is already over the number 1. So we've got feet in the numerator, feet in the denominator. Those will cancel, and then there'll be a factor of 1, and 1 times centimeters leaves me with simply centimeters. Similarly over here, we've got days in the numerator, days in the denominator, so those are going to cancel, and I will be left with just the months. So we've got a little bit there about how this is going to help us cancel the units, but it's also going to help us to choose our conversion factor. So let's go ahead and do an example. In order to convert units, you first must know a conversion factor. So here's our question: how many days are in a decade? The first thing I need to determine is what units do I need for my answer, and that I'm going to place at the end. So how many days are in a decade? I'm trying to figure out how many days. Days need to be my answer. So I'm going to place days down here at the end. There, I've got days down at the end. So what's step 2? Step 2 says to fill in the first box with the starting units. Okay, let's try to do that. So the starting units. How many days are in a decade? Days are what we're trying to find. We're starting with a decade. A decade. So decades are our units, and A would mean 1. So we're going to put 1 decade in our starting box. In the second box, with a conversion factor to cancel at least one of the starting units. Okay, so we want to cancel the units. So if we go back and look, to cancel the units, if I have a unit in the numerator and in the denominator, it will cancel out. So I want to cancel the unit of decade. It's in the numerator, therefore I need to put a decade in the denominator. Now I just need to figure out what my conversion factor is. So I need to figure out how many days are in a decade, but I don't know that. What I do know is how many years are in a decade. I know there are 10 years in a decade. That would be a unit of 1. 10 years divided by 1 decade would be a unit of 1. So that is what I'm going to use. So now I've got decades in the numerator, decades in the denominator. They cancel. Problem is I've got years for my answer. I need days. So there must be another step. So here again, we've got our decades that canceled. Now I've got years. I need to get to days. So I need another conversion factor. And what do I want to cancel? Well, I'm trying to get to days, and I've got years. I need to cancel this years out. So let's see. If I want to cancel the years, it's in the numerator. Then I need to put years in the denominator so that they cancel. So now I've got the years cancel. But what about years? So I need to figure out years. Well, trying to get the days. Do you know how many days are in a year? That would be our conversion factor. And I do. There are 365 days in 1 year. Now these other spaces over here would be if you need to keep going. Say that we didn't have days yet. Or maybe instead of days we're trying to get to minutes. So now we're at days and we need to get to minutes. So we still have to eliminate days. So there's more space. There might be more space than is necessary for some of the problems. Alright, so now what do we do? Well, we simply are going to multiply. So let's go ahead and do that. I've got 1 times 10 is 10, and 10 times 365 is 3,000. Use blue. Is 3,650. So that's the numerator. In the denominator, I have 1 times 1, so that's pretty simple. 1. This will be my fractional form, and it can be reduced just to 3,650. If we had a different number other than 1 on the bottom, we could reduce it there. And then decimal form, if we go ahead and divide, in this case, we're actually not going to get a decimal, but sometimes you will. Let's go ahead and write our answer here as well. So 3,650 days in 1 decade. Okay, so there was an example on how to convert your units. The next step is to go ahead and work on the worksheet.